Yeah.
You didn't expect that, eh?
No, it's cool. Let's do it again. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I'm not sure if many of you know, but I've learned quite a lot just being here the last week. I'm a final year veterinary student at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. So yeah, I don't really know much about architecture and all this land use stuff. So it's been pretty cool to learn. I think, so I changed my mind in the course of today. I decided that I would start with my question that I was going to ask last, just because it was really incredible for me to see how many lives my grandpa's touched. And I think overall, and most importantly, I'd like to ask you, Opa, what advice you would, looking back at all the years, what advice would you give all of us to be as successful and as humble as you are? How do we do that?
Yeah, I think part of it is what I read at the end of my speech there is to, and it's just keep your head down and do your work, and you don't have to go above the radar screen to be successful. You can just carry on with what you believe and what you want to do. And in my life, I've always taken risks, calculated risks. And even if you do take risks, and if you hit a brick wall, and if you're sure and you've done your work and you've done your homework, I think the risk will pay off. To me, like I said, my life was all about nice risks. I've taken risks. My family, moving my family here, being dispossessed of my land and start again. So, yeah, I think just keep your name clean. That's all you've got. It takes with you. And you can't keep running. You can run sometime, but God's catching up with you. So keep your name clean, be honest, be truthful, truth to yourself, truthful to your family and the people you're around with. I mean, it's very simple actually if you stick to the basics.
Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think what I've learned from, first of all, I don't know how I got hijacked to be part of this, because really this is meant to be, Chris's moment and the light's supposed to shine on him here, but it's a privilege to sit with him here nevertheless. One of the things that I learned from Chris is, and I can say it, tongue in cheek, is he's got this, in his agree room, he doesn't have a boardroom, he's got an agree room. But there's another poster in the agree room, agree with me now and you can save yourself a lot of time later. I think that's a lot of wisdom for me because it means that I have to prepare myself much better for others to agree with me faster. So it's not so much about imposing something, it is about me having to be much more at the cutting edge, prepared, well read and researched before I present the thing to the person that I want to have agree with me. So at a professional level it is working remarkably well. I made a mistake to try and sell that concept to my wife. It didn't work so well there, So I think that's one of my biggest takeaways. And then, Chris's age, I want to be like him when I grow up, and still work as hard and as smart as he does at his age, and it's a remarkable thing, just we don't stop. So that's big.
Yeah, and I'm going to interrupt you there. I've been sent here with a question from the family at home on that age note. Can you give us a time when you're going to stop working, Opa?
I can't. I said before, if I want to be around, and as long as I'm around, I want to be useful. It's a big gift in life to determine to know when to stop. And some things I've stopped, some things I've stopped doing. But there are things that I can still, the moment I feel I start forgetting things or I'm not going to do it, I will stop. But at the moment, there's too many exciting things in our country that I feel I can contribute to. There's too many exciting things in our town. And I'm a passionate South African. I'm an African. My 8 generations African. I discovered through my DNA test I had done here and my heritage that my great-great-great-great-grandfather in 1659 was a black slave. He was born in slavery in Cape Town when the first settlers arrived there. And they taught him to make wine. And he was a slave for 23 years and made a free man and became a wine farmer. So I can't be anything else than an African. I happen to be a white African, but I'm an African. On the airport, before we left there, I started talking to a person, and I heard his accent, and he was American, and I said, "Where are you from?" He says, "From America. I'm an American." They said, "And you?" I said, "I'm an African." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, what are you asking? If you're a black American, why can't there be a white African? And it's in our family, it's in our DNA. I don't want to live anywhere. I will keep on working there, and as long as my son and Jeff and the other guys are taking over, I've got to report to my son now, and we have lots of arguments that Jeff's aware, and he's much, I've got to. He says, "How much fees have you written this month, Dad? And what's your project? And where are you?" And so on. So, as long as I can do that, I'll be working. And but I gently hand over. I've started back. I'm only a 7% shareholder in the company now, and that'll dissipate in the next 2 or 3 years, and then I'll be butt naked.
Thanks. I was hoping for a short answer, but that was good. Thanks. Okay. How has your childhood and your farming life in South Africa affected and shaped your ideas of what you wanted to create?
I think it had a big influence. I studied agriculture. I didn't have a farm. My dad didn't have a farm. And I graduated as a sharecropper and started buying farms and buying land and reading the land. And I think that's one thing that I have to say, what I do best is to read a piece of land, understand the land, understand what's happening. And being a farmer, like I think Robert referred to, you know what's going on, you know where the wind's coming from. And you can do it all over the world. I looked at, when I was here, at the American Indians, where they built. They knew exactly where to build. The people in Africa, the tribes there, they don't build on clay soils or soils that drain poorly, or they don't build their houses where there's a hot summer breeze all the time. They build where the cool summer breezes are and where they're protected from the cold winter winds. And you go into China, I lived there for 3 years, worked there for 3 years, the same thing. The Chinese have developed it into like what they call feng shui. And basically, we've lost that knack in the West to read the land. And being a farmer taught me, you have to take risk to make it. You have to be able to read the land. And then later on, when I was expropriated, I went back to university and I started studying. And that helped me today quite a lot, the definition of taking risk, of understanding what's happening on a piece of land, and that's where I feel my strength is. And it's been proven to be, some of it, successful.
And what motivated you to return to the University of Pretoria to study and then later do your complete your PhD at Texas A&M University?
Well, I was expropriated, like I said. The government then purchased my land. I had no choice. And I had the money, and I said to my wife, "Well, I feel like going back to university." I told the story, I think, yesterday. And I arrived there. I was then like a guy in the country with a degree in agriculture, and you get elected on committees and boards, and I was chairman of the Farmers Union and so on, and I went back to university and arrived there with a Ford F100 pickup truck and a hat on, and went to the professor and he says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to study." Yeah, and he says, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah," and everybody was like sniggering and laughing. But 5 years later, I graduated, and I said to my wife, "Yeah, you know, it's like a midlife crisis. What are we going to do?" I said, "Let's go to America." I always wanted to be, you know, we always had books and saw what happened in America. There was no television or anything at that time, or very little. And I applied for 4 schools, airmail to all of them, and eventually I got admitted to all 4, and I had to go to the US Embassy, to the student advisor. There was a lady there, and she said, "Okay, let's do. Have you ever lived in snow areas before, cold areas or whatever?" I said, "No." "Well, then you can forget going to Boston or that is, forget it." And the other one was UCLA, and it was 1978, 79, and she looked at us and she looked at the kids and she said, "Well, maybe you should forget UCLA. There's some funny things there." So that left Texas and Georgia. And I had a booked airmail, a thick book like this, a yearbook, Texas A&M, with all the subjects, and I was waging, it's like a telephone book that thick, and waging through it, and I looked at the program, and I said to her, "I don't like the programs that I see in Georgia." She says, "Well, then go to Texas." And that's how I landed here, and I can thank God for the fact that I landed here. It made a dramatic impact in my life. I met some wonderful friends and wonderful people here, long-term friendships, long-term relationship. Don Austin, Mike Murphy, and Ben, Maria, and Doreen. And okay, both of them worked there for us and worked with me. John Martlock was there, he was a professor here. And a lot of people, Laura, there, and they all came, and it's nice to be here. It's actually very nice for me to come back here, and every time I'm now sit to the table there, I've learned something yesterday. My jaw dropped open. And I'm going to walk into the office next week and say, "Hey guys, we must do some parametric design here." And they're going to go, "What?" But, you know, and we've talked to the dean and said, "Listen," and I've spoken to Ed Price yesterday, I'm going to offer a base for Texas A&M in Knysna, for anybody. Us Kreuter there was with eco-science management, Ed Price with Ag Life. Why not use us? We're there, you know, we're fond of this place, we like this place. And while we're there, let's try and build something. We've tried, and every time there's a bit of a halt, and then there's an election here and a new president. We have a new president, it's going to have a new president. We had an election, and then there were disasters and natural disasters, and all those things put a stop to your plans. But let's hope the disasters are past us for a while now, and we can execute the plans. Too long again.
Thanks for stopping. Jeff, I don't personally know you very well, and I'd like to ask if you can give us a little bit of background on yourself. For example, like where did you grow up? Where did it all start?
Can I just tell a little quick thing before I answer your question?
You guys know we have a time limit.
Before I forget this. One of the one of the pieces of golden nugget that I got from Chris here is when I arrived in Eisner, at the top of my agenda was to buy myself a really lovely boat. And then I told Chris, listen, I want to buy myself a boat, and it has to be a big boat, and we've got this big piece of water. And then Chris told me, listen, the best time or the best day in a man's life is when he buys his speedboat. But the even better day in a man's life is when he sells the bloody thing. And I told my wife this, and my wife says, oh my God, I want to meet this Chris Mulder. Thank God this boat is off the agenda. And a few months later, I told my wife, listen, I want to get rid of my car. I want to buy a new car. And she says, what car do you want to buy? And I said, no, I'm going to buy a Range Rover Sport. And she says, oh my God, this is so big. And I says, well, the same guy that gave me this brilliant advice about the boat advised me that the Range Rover Sport is the best vehicle that you can get. So now I'm driving a Range Rover Sport. I'm telling the story because this is kind of what's going on many days outside of working hours between Dr. Mulder and I, where we banter and get advice and wisdom and so on. And for a guy where I grew up and how I grew up, this is a tremendous gift for me at this age of my life. I grew up on the back streets of Cape Town, on the Cape Flats, and grew up in a poor community. My parents had to work very hard to get 5 of their kids through university. We all got through university. I did my master's in international defense studies. So my core professional qualification is in defense planning and intelligence analysis. And I did my master's at the University of Kiel in international defense planning. And I was a senior officer in the South African National Defense Force in defense intelligence, where we did tremendous intelligence analysis, including as far back as 1996. We advised then the South African government that we are going to have one of the most devastating water crises. And that information was made possible to us by the head of station of the Central Intelligence Agency in Pretoria. It was a formal meeting that we had with the CIA, where they shared with us intelligence imagery, satellite imagery, about the water distribution over the next 25 to 30 years in sub-Saharan Africa. And South Africa was identified as the most critical countries. And I almost lost my job because I had a meeting with the head of station of the CIA without authorization from my boss. And they weren't interested about the content. They were more upset about the fact that I had this meeting with the CIA without official authorization. And then they took me and my colleagues off that project about looking at water resource management as a national security challenge and dilemma. So that is a bit of my background, and I then decided that after living in Johannesburg that I'm going to move to Knysna, me and my family, and one of the best moves, and I knocked on Chris's office, and I told him, listen, I'm so-and-so, and he says, oh no, I've heard of you from my son Steph, and Steph and I are good friends, and before you know it, Chris and I started talking and planning and plotting and thinking about new things and exciting things, and I hope 80% of those things are going to materialize. A lot of those things are materializing as we speak, but I hope more of the exciting things that we're talking about will materialize. And with the last tongue-in-cheek comment, so we're spending a lot of time together, and one day I was drinking coffee at his daughter's restaurant, which is just opposite my office. And this one guy came past me and he asked me, I heard that you've joined Mulder's company. And I said, yeah, I've joined Mulder's company. I'm a partner there now. And he says, oh, now you've joined the mafia. So I said to this guy, listen, sit down. Let me tell you something. But please promise me you're not going to tell anyone this. And now he's eagerly listening, you know. And I said, listen, I heard about this mafia story until I joined them. It's damn true. And this guy said, get out of here. I said, listen, when we have a board meeting, when we enter the boardroom, Mulder will sit in his big, thick leather chair, and before the meeting starts, we all have to kneel in front of him and kiss his fat ring. And a couple of days later, the mayor actually said, I heard that you're kissing Chris's ring, you know. So, yeah, that's also part of what we contend with in our little town, is, you know, stories, and Chris is a land grabber and this and that. In spite of the fact that, you know, Teeson Island is probably one of the biggest revenue contributors to our town. It employs over 1,800 people permanently. It has a commercial center that is, you know, cosmopolitan and first world standard by any chance. And so, yeah, that is, you know, all that I am, Maricia. And my office is above her dad's office. Her dad's my landlord.
It's a small town. Okay, so with that, knowing that, and having come from a different discipline, what attracted you to CMAI?
Well, first of all, I saw probably one of the most outstanding drawings, freehand drawings, at a bar. Steph and I had drinks at a bar, and Steph drew me a building that him and I spoke about. We dreamed about building like a conference center. And Steph drew this elements of this building freehand, and it was a piece of art with a guy sitting and sipping whiskey at a bar and drawing freehand, just with almost to scale, this image. And I just told myself, this is where I'm going. This is just phenomenal. And then I had several conversations with Steph and with Chris, and the work ethic of this place and the projects that they're busy with and all of that. It is just extraordinary. You heard from the 7 guys on the stage this morning. I mean, they could sit there and talk until tomorrow morning about some of the stuff that they went through, and Chris and Steph and Eugene and the other guys working in the office. And so that is what I got. That is what attracted me to CMAI. But over and above that is, you know, here you have Chris with his age, and he comes from kind of Afrikaner stock. And yet, he is so tuned in with the current political realities, and he's adapted himself to new ways of doing work with the new political dispensation and so on. And in fact, I'm not with CMAI using my political connections. I mean, Chris is on first name terms with a lot of the top decision makers in our political community. So, I mean, his next door neighbor, people from the ANC on Teeson Island. I don't have to introduce him to these guys. So that is what brought me to this remarkable company, and I think I'm a sponge, so I can take up information very quickly, and I take up a lot. I think I am engaging with architecture and urban design and property development like probably schooled architects cannot talk about, you know, and but much to do with Dr. Mulder's influence and mentorship.
Thanks. I was lucky enough to grow up on Teeson Islands. We moved there when I was 9 years old, and I grew up there and had an incredible, safe, amazing childhood where I have really good memories about, spending New Year's in the clubhouse and just being able to stay out until whatever time at night, not having to worry about, especially in South Africa, not having to worry about, being home, being indoors, being within the huge walls of all the houses there. So that really for me was something that, geez, I can't even imagine my life without. And I guess I realize now how fortunate I am that that's something my grandpa created. So with that, I would like to ask, we heard about the seahorses and how that development, or how the development affected that. But are there any other unplanned and sort of unexpected benefits that Thiessen and even Crossways that came with that?
I think we touched most on it, but to talk to Jeff Booth's terminology of enduring value, the social value now, after 10 years, the trees are big, the society found their spot and their place, and there's a commune. I've read an article one day, they call it communitas, where the community people come and gather and talk and sit and talk, and it's a place where you walk on the streets and you know your neighbor's dog and you know your neighbor's children, and they've grown up in front of you, and all the people are still there, and the enduring value and the property values go up and up and up all the time. Now it's becoming very well known. It's one of the blue flag beaches. You don't get a blue flag beach membership or nomination if it's not really almost pristine and you've got all the facilities there. So to me, when I walk home or drive home every day and I walk past those trees that we planted this big, and I know almost every tree and everything on the road, and I see, and although I've stood back now from being involved, I think you've got to learn to step out certain days, and I cringe when I see somebody prune the trees or cut the trees or whatever, but I've learned to keep quiet and not react and think. But that's fine too. There's a reason for that, but I've got tremendous satisfaction every day. And when I open the front door in the morning, sometimes we forget to close the front door. My wife says, "You didn't close the door last night." I said, "Oh, well, that's fine." But I walk out there and I thank God every day when I walk out and see the landscape and see what in the area where we live and appreciate that. And I think that's tremendous satisfaction. And that's a spiritual value I think we get by what we've done and lived there. So that comes to the fore now, the environmental value, the spiritual value, and the community value that we didn't think about. You can't put that on a spreadsheet. You can't put money to it or quantify it. It's just there. But it shows in the property values and the house prices and I think that's going on. And we hope to do that. Well, we try to do that all the time. It's not just about making money. I think if you use money as a lousy way of trying to project who you are, you must try and avoid that. And I always said you can only drive one car at a time, drink one whiskey at a time, and sit on one chair at a time. And not anymore. So, for me, it's sharing and creating something and contribute to the country, which we need. Our country is in dire need of better management now.
As we've heard now on multiple occasions, it sounds like you guys enjoy a coffee and whiskey on a regular basis together. What do you guys talk about? What does the future hold for CMAI? And
well, firstly, at about 5 o'clock, I sent Jeff a WhatsApp and said the ice is melting, and then we have a shot of whiskey and we talk for 2 hours. And it's amazing stuff that comes out of that. I've many times said we work too hard and we think too little. That's a common sickness of all of us. You work too hard. By the time you finish working, you're tired, you want to go home, you want to spend time with your family. You don't get, but Jeff and I sit there and we talk for 2 hours and we strategize and we think and we talk. Don't think we've ever argued. Like and really argue. We debate and we discuss. And I think that's probably the best stage in my life now where you can sit and think and say, what about this? What can happen there? What do you think will happen there? What do you think we should do here? And it's okay, you go that, and you found that guy, I'll find this guy, and we'll talk about it the day after tomorrow. And you think, and you don't react. And you make your phone calls, and I said, did you talk to the guy? I said, yeah. I said, what did he say? No, it's this. Okay, well, what do we do now? What do you think? And he then sort of reins me in, because when I get going, I tend to get going. And he reins me in.
To the pleasure of Steph, his son. You know, Steph and Eugene, they run the office. And they have this thing, you know, anything outside of billable hours is a risk, you know. So I have to promise them sometimes that I will slow it down, or, you know, and then on the surface sometimes I slow it down for them, and then Chris and I said, no, let's go more, you know. But I think some of our best ideas were born around a good single malt. And going into Africa, understanding the political dynamics and how can we interface with it, both at a local level as well as at a national level. How do we build relations without falling into the trap, like many other businesses, where they end up with mud on their face because they picked the wrong people, or they had to pay their way, or whatever the case may be. So a lot of our time sitting in the AGGIE room is about strategizing how best and with the most integrity to navigate complex South African decision-making spaces, because we have brand new ideas. So it's many times difficult for the authorities to understand exactly what it is that we want to do. But, you know, one of the results were that recently we attended a meeting of one of the local municipalities with the mayor and all his senior officials. And after I spoke in the meeting, the mayor says, but Jeff, can you give us an idea of what CMAI is really? And so I spoke about Chris Mulder and Teasen Island and blah, blah, blah. And then the mayor said, you see, I told you guys, I don't run with small dogs. And so I think that's much what, Maricia, what happens over those whiskeys. It's to really it's to build vision. And Steph and Eugene actually enjoy it, because they know that many times out of Chris and my conversations comes exciting ideas and new areas of operating. They just many times concerned whether it's going to make money or not, you know. And but we're working on that, you know, to build a pot of honey just for doing risk work. I think that Nigerian guy that got up in the auditorium may be one of those possibilities of bringing some money into the risk work area.
Thank you. That concludes it for me, unless you guys have anything else you would like to add.
Maricia, can we ask one question? I'd like to know who inspires you? Where have you gotten your inspiration from?
I think there's a lot of people and a lot of actions that inspired me. I must again admit, you know, I came here with a family basically knowing nothing, and every time I worked on my thesis and I submitted to Don, he gave it back to me with a note that says, I don't understand it. And then I worked another month or two and I gave it back to him and I says, I don't understand it. And about the third time he says, I still don't understand it. But I mean, I learned such a lot here. And I've always thinking back on the fact that Don came and worked with us and Michael Murphy came and worked with us and other people worked with us. I mean, I got my inspiration from there and they're my mentors. And I'll never forget it. And, you know, through my life and time, I think my team and the family is my inspiration and they all work together. We were so fortunate that you can draw a 100-meter circle and the whole family lives in that circle on Teeson Island, and the support base and the surety that if something happens, doesn't matter with whom, there's always a support base, and that makes a big difference in one's life. And I can just be very thankful that so happened. It's the team and the whole thing that inspired me, and the success that we had, especially, you know, Teeson Island took 15 years of doing, 7 years of planning, a year of getting ready, 7 years of building, 15 years to complete, and now another 10 years, and there's this maturity setting in. So that's really enough inspiration for me. Obviously, I went to different places. We never went on holiday, really. When we went on holiday, I always had a tape measure, or we looked at something, or we went to a nice place to look at something. When we came back here, we had motorhomes and we drove to specific places to the west coast and the east coast, and we looked at new urbanism, and we looked at the stuff they've built in Carolinas and on the intercoastal waterway. I always looked at something, you know. I was not a guy who could sit there for 10, 14 days with my legs on the sand. I always was interested in doing something, and the whole family was like that, and that's basically my inspiration.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Jeffrey Booth again for organizing this. I think he's done incredible the way he's done it, and I'd like to give him applause, all of us, please. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, just wanted to thank everybody for coming out today. I know some of you traveled from far and wide, so thank you very much. Specifically, Professor Booth, I know how much time, effort, energy, and at times headaches that went into planning this. So from all of us, thank you very much for putting this together. Again, I know this was the third one. It was the first one I had the pleasure of attending, but I look forward to in the future. Bill Peel, thank you for being most excellent of hosts. The 7 former interns, thank you guys very much for sharing your stories. I know some of you traveled from around Texas, and even Chad, who traveled down from my hometown of Chicago. For those that don't know, they're currently under a winter storm advisory and getting over a foot of snow, so he chose a great day. And most importantly, to Maricia, Jeff, Leon, and Dr. Mulder, thank you for coming here. I know it actually took, probably over a full day just to get here, and then spending the time in various meetings, attending classes, lunches, dinners, even going to a piano bar with some of us on Wednesday night. Leon is hands down the best South African Elvis dancer I've ever seen in my life. But seriously, thank you for sharing a small part of your guys' story with all of us. We really do appreciate it. And on that note, if anybody's interested in a much less formal setting, we're going to head over to Dixie Chicken with the CMAI group. Thank you all.